Hello, guys. What is happening? Welcome to tonight's live stream. So it's happened. They hiked 50 basis points. We're going to go through that, some of the repercussions of that. And, I wanted to do like a firework display or something, but it's so freaking cold here in the Arctic Circle where I live in Calgary that we just can't do it. But it's just incredible. Without further ado, let's get right into this. So here we go, straight from the horse's mouth. Bank of Canada increases policy interest rate by 50 basis points, begins quantitative tightening. So this is right from the Bank of Canada's website, coming directly from the horse's mouth, so we can see what they're saying. Yeah, we're going to go through it. And also, I just want to not leave New Zealand out, because overnight New Zealand also hiked by 50 basis points. So that's New Zealand and Canada, two of the biggest housing bubbles in the world. And we'll go through that later so you can see it for yourselves. And they both hiked by 50 basis points, both the biggest hike since the early 2000s, over 20 years. So anyway, let's get into this and see what they're saying. Are they hawkish? Are they not? The Bank of Canada today increased its target for the overnight rate to 1%, with the bank rate at 1.25% and the deposit rate at 1%. The bank is also ending reinvestment and will begin quantitative tightening, QT, effective April 25th. Just for those that don't know what QT is, QT, when we think of QE, that is essentially expanding the money supply, but it's not money supply, it's the credit supply that it expands. And it doesn't even expand it in a direct form. It just really increases bank reserves so the banks can then lend out more money. Like, it's not like everybody says, it's printing credit. It's not printing money. Even I've used that term loosely before, but yeah, that's practically what it is. So QT is sucking money out of the system. It's sucking credit out of the system. So I don't even think this has ever been done in Canada, as far as I can see, since before 2000. So that's pretty big news. Anyway, maturing Government of Canada bonds on the bank's balance sheet will no longer be replaced, and as a result, the size of the balance sheet will decline. So that will represent a decrease in the money supply, because that's government's basically, the bank is doing the opposite of monetizing government debt. They are taking it away. So it's not a good thing. Russia's ongoing invasion of Ukraine is causing unimaginable human suffering and new economic uncertainty. Price spikes in oil, natural gas, and other commodities are adding to inflation around the world. Supply disruptions resulting from the war are also exacerbating ongoing supply constraints and weighing on activity. These factors are the primary drivers of a substantial upward revision of the bank's outlook for inflation in Canada. So they are literally trying to blame inflation now on the Ukraine. And as we know, inflation was going parabolic before Russia decided to invade Ukraine. So this is just total load of BS that they're stating here. So it's just ridiculous when you really think about it. They must think that we have the memory of a goldfish, and they might be right with some people. But the war in Ukraine is disrupting the global recovery, just as most economies are emerging from the impact of the Omicron variant of the virus. European countries are more directly impacted by confidence effects and supply dislocations caused by the war. China's economy is facing new cerveza outbreaks and an ongoing correction in its property market. Wow, that's interesting that they've actually acknowledged that. Um, Soon to be Canada, too. Don't you worry about that. In the United States, domestic demand remains very strong, and the US Federal Reserve has clearly indicated its resolve to use its monetary policy tools to control inflation, because we all know that these central planners and central bankers are in the driving seat when it comes to inflation. I mean, they've literally just told us that they've had to revise their inflation revisions or whatever their inflation targets or whatever they think they're going to go to because of the Ukraine war. And here they are saying that they can control this beast of inflation. Isn't it just hilarious, the contradictions that are made in this, which, whatever. US growth is expected to moderate to a pace more in line with potential growth. Global financial conditions have tightened and volatility has increased. The bank now forecasts global growth of about 3.5% this year, 2.5% in 2023, and 3.25% in 2024. So they're actually acknowledging that growth is going to slow down, and that's something, I guess. Not a recession, though, by any means. In Canada, growth is strong and the economy is moving into excess demand. Labor markets are tight and wage growth is back to its pre-Cerveza pace and rising, still deeply in the red, though, in real terms. Wage inflation, wages in real terms are deeply negative. Some of the things they say. Where are we? Businesses increasingly report that they are having difficulty meeting demand and are able to pass on higher input costs by increasing prices. While the cerveza sickness continues to mutate and circulate, high rates of medication have reduced its health and economic impacts. Growth looks to have been stronger in the first quarter than projected in January, and is likely to pick up in the second quarter. Consumer spending is strengthening with lifting of the cerveza containment measures. That's one way of putting it. Exports and business investment will continue to recover, supported by strong foreign demand and high commodity prices. Housing market activity, which has been exceptionally high, is expected to moderate. So they're actually acknowledging that it's all, but to be honest, let's face it, guys, it's already moderated. We've seen markets decline in March off a 25 basis point hike. So it's going to be real interesting to see what comes of this over the next couple of months, with 50 basis points now in hand and at the insane price levels that we're at right now. So the bank forecasts that Canada's economy will grow by 4.25% this year before slowing to 3.25% in 2023 and 2.25% in 2024. Robust business investment, labor productivity growth, and higher immigration will add to the economy's productive capacity, while higher interest rates should moderate growth in domestic demand. CPI inflation is 5.7%, load of BS. It's around 20%. Don't believe that. Above the bank's forecast in its January monetary policy report, inflation is being driven by rising energy and food prices and supply disruptions in combination with strong global and domestic demand. Core measures of inflation have all moved higher as price pressures broaden. Anyway, I'm not going to go in. This goes on for quite a while, so I'm not going to go any more in depth in that because most of it is BS, as you and I know. But it's interesting, different points that they hit on there. But, this interview that happened was really interesting, I thought. Some of the language that we got out of this was pretty, yeah. Anyway, it's just funny. So central banks won't let 1970s stagflation emerges. Spoiler alert, it already has. It's just the CPI is so bogus now and understates inflation so much, as we went through on yesterday's live stream, that it's not visible. So they can say it's not happening, even if it is in fact happening, which is the case. So this is what Macklem says, and this was published today. So here we go. Hours after delivering the biggest interest rate hike in 22 years, Tiff Macklem had a message for investors. There's no reason to worry about inflation getting out of hand. I mean, come on. It is already well out of hand. Just hold on, guys. Don't worry about inflation. It's already at 20%. We're just telling you it's at 5%, but you know it's at 20%. But if we just tell you it's at 5%, it's guaranteed that some of you guys are going to believe it. Just hilarious. While there is plenty of uncertainty in the global economy, the Bank of Canada governor told Bloomberg News he's quite certain that policymakers will be able to avoid a return of 1970s style stagflation. Well, I'm 100% sure he's not going to be able to do that, because it's already here. The stagflation is here, the high levels of inflation. Inflation is actually running as high as it was in the 1940s after the Second World War. Forget the 70s. We overtook that over the past couple of months. We're now running at 1940s levels of inflation. It's just absolutely insane. But yeah, I mean, God. In the interview, Macklem said the world's central bankers have learned the hard lessons from letting inflation get too high, of course. Yes, they definitely have. Yeah, like I said, people are laughing at Tiff, is what Trader 586 says, and you got that spot on. I mean, how can you not laugh at this guy? But a lot of people will take his word for it. They'll find comfort in what he says because they know themselves that they're in so much trouble. In the interview, Macklem said the world's central bankers have learned the hard lessons from letting inflation get too high. They're adjusting policy quickly. I mean, are they? Because I said last year in May that they needed to start raising rates then. And here we are a year later, and they're just starting to raise rates. So that's not very quickly. It's been the slowest response ever, one could argue. I mean, there has been so many calls for them to raise rates, and they haven't done it over the last year. So it's interesting. They're adjusting policy quickly to avoid a scenario where price pressures remain elevated and the global economy sinks into a recession. He said, a lot has changed since the 1970s. It hasn't. Come on. This is just ridiculous. Said Macklem, who earlier Wednesday delivered a 0.5 percentage point rate increase to wrestle inflation down from a 3-decade high. Well, he hasn't wrestled it down. He's just delivered the hike. They're assuming that the hike is going to do that. But you know what they say about assuming it makes an ass out of me and you. But anyway, come on. Central banks are going to be much more ahead of it than they were. Of course they are. And here he is, sat on some very strange seat. Is that like a social distancing pod or something like that? Seems very, very staged picture. In Canada, that means normalizing monetary policy relatively quickly, not quickly, relatively quickly, to keep demand in check and prevent inflation expectations from hardening. You know, Jeff Snyder says a lot about inflation expectations and how they mean zero, nothing, nada, and they use, it's one of their key metrics. Just something to throw out there, a little tidbit. Macklem's decision, which brought Canada's policy rate to 1%, came on the same day New Zealand's central bank lifted its official cash rate by half a percentage point to 1.5% earlier in the day. A hawkish pivot is also expected in the US, where Chairman Jerome Powell and other policymakers have put a half-point hike on the table for the Federal Reserve's meeting in May. On Wednesday, Macklem also provided guidance on how high interest rates could rise in Canada, saying he expects to see the policy rate return to more normal settings of 2 to 3%, but if needed, they could go even higher. Oh my God. Let's just get up the interest rate chart for Canada here. And I'm pretty sure they never got to 2% even after 2008. Let's take a look. No, they did not. So I'm going to bring this up so you can see it here. So this is the interest rate. You can see that they never even got to 2%. And this is after 2008. Now, just imagine how much prices of assets that basically interest rates are heavily correlated to have gone up, like homes, since 2008. That's when the whole bubble started, for crying out loud. It's just this. I mean, this is hilarious that he's saying a normal rate between 2 and 3%. That ain't normal for Canada. That is just hilarious. And not only that, guys, he's saying it could go even higher. So you can throw any number out there and it might stick. But yeah, I mean, if we get to 2%, it will be a bloodbath in things like the real estate market. Mark my words, it will be, because the debt servicing costs, the amount of debt outstanding, the increase in the servicing costs on that debt will push like 40-50% of people into default. They won't be able to make their payments. And already going to 1%, as I was going to discuss later, is going to push a massive amount of people into default. These people who took variable rate mortgages out at 1% are going to see their variable rate mortgage head to 3%, near 3%. And you might only say, well, Luke, yeah, but they only increased the policy rate by 75 basis points over the past couple of months. Yeah, but the thing is, there's a risk premium associated with that. And the thing is, when rates rise, the risk premium increases, and it increases for a reason, because the amount of people that are likely to default goes up. That means the risk goes up. That means the risk premium goes up. And that is exactly what you're going to see. So variable rates are just going to go up. I think prime rates are going to probably end up around 2.8% tomorrow when the adjustments are made. And that's huge. That's way more than they were sat at just 3 months ago. So people, like, that's a huge increase. Like, for example, if you took out a $600,000 mortgage with a 1% variable and it jumps to 3%, your payments going from around $1,900 to $2,500. That's over a 30% increase in your payment. That's huge. So it's just, I don't know what to say. Like, if you can't see this coming, this is it's like a freight train heading down a hill, heading to go off a cliff. Like, I mean, it's just hilarious. And I just find it hilarious, the language these central bankers use and the way they string sentences together, contradicting themselves, and nobody pulls it apart, is just about hilarious, to be honest. DNPR says the supply narrative is about to be tested in real time. Yeah, and you want to know something funny. When they drop rates and artificially stimulate the economy, it actually borrows demand from the future. And when the prices appreciate like they've done, that actually suppresses supply. So what you then have is a recipe for disaster, like what happened in 2008 in the US, because it was similar circumstances, albeit lower inflation than we have right now. And that's why people are saying this is going to be way worse than 2008. And I believe it will be. The banks, they don't even have the money. If the assets decline more than 20%, if they go down more than 20%, the banks are going to be in serious trouble. There's going to be absolute it's just going to be a disaster. The thing which we really need to think about, though, is the response to when the banking crisis happens. What's that going to be? Because here's the thing. If they go and they say, okay, we're going to drop rates, we're going to artificially stimulate the economy, which they might do, and it may be very temporary, because if they do something like that in the face of very high inflation, you'll have what happened to Turkey. The currency will just spiral into a doom loop. And then it's practically the economy's going into a depression then. And, it's a swing between a very, very bad recession and decades of stagflation and a decades and decades of a depressionary environment. And really, those people who are calling for central bankers to drop rates in the face of high inflation, if a banking crisis happened and that was sustained, those people do not understand what what they are actually saying, what they're actually wishing for. They're wishing for a depression. And the funny thing is, guys, a lot of those people are only wishing that because of real estate. And when you look at how real estate performed in Turkey, it went down in real terms. It went up in nominal terms, down in real terms, because the currency was collapsing so fast. So you'll see the same thing. Do I think that will happen? They may pause it. They may start doing quantitative easing while tightening rate. Who knows what they're going to pull out the bag. But the end result isn't going to be good. And once the bubble is pricked, that's it. It can't be reinflated. If you pop a bubble, can you blow it up again? No, it's gone. It's over. And that's why in 2008, when they dropped rates to the floor, did quantitative easing, housing prices still went down for about 5 years, and the bottom wasn't reached until, I want to say 2011, but I think it was 2013. But obviously it was different in different markets. Okay, so let's go back here to this BNN and continue onwards. So yeah, more normal settings of 2 or 3%. So that is something that you really want to notice. Okay, that's something that you really want to take note of, because them putting that out, it's guidance. It's guidance essentially. People aren't going to pick up on stuff like this, but trust me, big money and banks, they're picking up on stuff like this, and they're going to see risk going way, way higher. So anyway, the economy just does not work well when inflation expectations become unmoored, when inflation is high and variable, Macklem said. While market-based expectations and yields have risen higher, they're still consistent with inflation coming back to the bank's 2% target, he said, adding that we wouldn't want to see them go further. So that's interesting. So he's been keeping an eye on the bond market and what's happening in there. And obviously we talked about that. I think we're going to see like the 5-year yield on the 5-year bond. It could get to 4%. I think if you look at where it's gone over the past 3 months and really plot that out over the year, you're talking 5-6%, but it's more likely to be around 4%, which is absolutely insane. Because just think about that. Like anybody who owns like a property and is renting it out, like they're literally getting the same as buying government bonds. Like, who's going to do that? So you'll see all those companies that thought they were real smart buying like real estate are going to start selling it and buying government bonds. So it's just, it's hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious what's happening right now. It's shifting. The ground is shifting beneath our feet. Macklem said that while inflation is higher, there's little evidence of recession risk, despite the yield curve inverting and all the other different signs that we're seeing. He says that recession risk, there is no recession risk. Don't worry about it, guys. I mean, a recession is essentially caused by people spending less money. So why would a recession happen? Because inflation is so out of control. The thing is, when you read stuff like this, it really makes me believe that these central planners and central bankers, they actually believe this bogus CPI number. Like, they actually think maybe that inflation is running at 5%. I don't know. Maybe they do. You have to remember that, like, Tiff Macklem doesn't live in the real world. He doesn't go to the grocery store and do his grocery shopping. Are you kidding me? He doesn't see these price increases that me and you see. So maybe he does really believe that number. But the reality is it's around 20%. And we discussed it on the live stream yesterday. You can go check that out after this one if you're interested, or go on Spotify and listen to the free podcast on there, because it's on there as well. And so will this will be on there too. But yeah, like, it is interesting, isn't it? Because I just think that, you know, these clowns are just so far behind the curve. They always literally say something and then the opposite happens. Like, that's literally what their job should be. We should just go with the opposite of what they say. The Bank of Canada is forecasting robust global growth of 3.5% in 2022, despite the pressures of Russia's war in Ukraine. In Canada, unemployment is at the lowest in more than 45 years, and it doesn't look anything like stagflation, he said. Yeah, I mean, stagflation isn't unemployment necessarily rising, though. Stagflation is essentially people losing purchasing power as their wages aren't going up with inflation anymore. They're deeply in the red. Now, unemployment will rise as a result of that, but obviously we're in the early days of that. The inflation has only really been high for 1 year, and typically these cycles last like 8 to 10 years. So we're early days, Tiff. Don't worry about that. So in fact, despite some worries, the Bank of Canada was slow to start tightening policy. Is this in the same article? Because I swear, like, we were just reading that they said how quick they are, or maybe that was what they said, and this is what BNN is now saying. So Macklem remains optimistic about a soft landing where higher interest rates do the job of slowing demand without causing a major economic disruption. I mean, the major economic disruption is just inevitable, and it's going to be a recession, could be a depression in the end, depending on the government's response. And does Jagmeet Singh and Justin Trudeau give you much hope? Those two, I mean, they what they have talked about with just in terms of economics, monetary policy, makes you believe that they have no clue when it comes to stuff like this. So those expectations hinge in large part on certain assumptions that supply chain problems will improve, business investment will accelerate, and productivity will rise as COVID rules are lifted. I do think those assumptions are balanced. And are there risks? Yes, there are risks on both sides. Wow, at least he acknowledges something. But that key point that I've highlighted in blue here is really key, that he said that it's going to return to the normal setting of 2% to 3%. I mean, that just ain't normal. It's not normal for Canada. That hasn't happened for 14 years. So how's that normal? But anyways, we're going to move on now. This article I just thought was great, and it came from Macro Business. And it's more about New Zealand, but Canada is also mentioned in here because whenever a housing bubble, real estate bubble is mentioned, Canada is mentioned because it's one of the biggest. Colossal New Zealand housing bubble engulfs economy. So this was 2 days ago. A cross-country analysis of dwelling values across the English-speaking world shows that New Zealand's housing market is by far the most overvalued. The next chart plots aggregate dwelling values against national gross domestic product and shows that New Zealand's housing market is 4.8 times the size of the economy, easily beating second place Australia 4.3 times and third place Canada 3.3 times. There you can see they got a nice chart on that, and it's really Australia, Canada, and New Zealand just leading the pack there. Canada is the green line, Australia the black, and then New Zealand is that blue line. The situation is similar when aggregate dwelling values are compared against total employee compensation, with New Zealand 11 times, again, easily beating second place Australia 9.4 times, and third place Canada 6.7 times. So we're not going to worry about Australia too much because they haven't increased their interest rates. We'll just stick with Canada and New Zealand because they're the ones who are actually tightening right now. And this is going to affect their incredibly overvalued housing market. So that's another interesting. Recent research from Capital Economics shows similar results, with New Zealand experienced the sharpest rise in housing prices relative to incomes across developed nations. House price to income ratio by country. And there you can see that New Zealand and Canada are the top. They're right up there. They are the top, and they are the countries that are tightening at a rapid rate. And nobody ever thought that would happen, did they? I mean, I've had so many people comment on my videos last year who said the Bank of Canada isn't going to raise interest rates. You're an idiot. Like, they're not even going to raise interest rates. That's never going to happen. Some people even said that they're going to lower rates. Well, I mean, I'm not saying I told you so, but really, you just have to look at the probability of what's going to happen. You don't have to try and predict everything with certainty. You just have to really, just have no bias and look at the probabilities of something happening. And yeah, you can see Canada, New Zealand, the Netherlands. We got a few people from the Netherlands on the channel. Australia, they're all up there, the main culprits. So as you can see, New Zealand housing prices are nearly double, 108%, their long-term average. So that just goes to show you how far they have to go when they drop, because literally these housing prices have got so far away from their long-term trend, New Zealand and Canada specifically. Capital Economics also shows that New Zealand consumer spending growth is particularly sensitive to changes in house prices. So we know that Canada will be the same. So it's going to basically compound the issue in the recession that we're going to face as a result of this. And it just shows you how coupled to real estate the economy really is. They unsubscribed in shame. Yeah, yeah, they probably did. Correlation between real house price inflation and consumer spending. And there you go. So there is a high correlation between all these countries, apart from Germany, it looks like. But New Zealand, way up there, 0.6%. UK, US, Canada are all on there. Those normal bubbles, Australia are also on there. Therefore, if New Zealand house prices were to fall sharply, then it is more likely to push the economy into a recession. The last point is particularly pertinent given Kiwi economists and financial markets are tipping sharp increases in mortgage rates to between 6.25 and 7.5%. Wow, that is brutal. And as we know, New Zealand's at 1.5%. They're 50 basis points ahead. But they were where we are right now in Canada just yesterday, which would add up to $1,250 in monthly mortgage repayments to the medium priced New Zealand home, $1,700 a month in Auckland. If interest rates were to rise this sharply, there is a high probability that New Zealand housing prices would crash, driving the economy into a recession. So yeah, unconventional economist who wrote this, and I think it was a pretty well written article. And by the way, all these articles I put in the description of all the live streams, all the sources for the video. So what we got here, DNPR says, always thought how stupid the idea of a soft landing is. Couple that with how unpredictable things are. They never saw the pandemic coming nor the war in Ukraine, so things will be smooth sailing now. Yeah, you got that right. It's incredible that they come out with this hogwash that, oh yeah, there's going to be a soft landing. Like, the time where there could have been a soft landing is long gone. Like, you're talking like 9 years ago, possibly 2008 was when they could have bought it to a soft landing, and a soft landing would have been declines of about 30% in housing prices. Like, where we're heading is just unbelievable, really. It really is unbelievable. And what I really want to crunch the numbers on is the government debt and what higher interest rates will mean for the government, so I can kind of see if they can even afford it, because if they can't, then that kind of means that rates do have a top, which they can't go any higher from. And it was something that Peter Schiff was talking about in his Saturday's podcast that I was listening to over the past couple of days when I've been working out. And he was saying in that about the US, he'd done the number crunch on the US and they couldn't afford it. But I know the US is in a way, way different position to Canada. They are in way more debt. So, or at least I think they are, because to be honest, I haven't really checked. So, yeah. Luke, did you read the article in Better Dwelling? BMO analyst wrote about the totally exaggerated supply issue in Canada. I think I put it on my Twitter, Trent. So if I actually go over there, I think I actually did a tweet about it that actually came out, that I actually put out yesterday. I'm just going to try and find it. Yes, here it is. And this is from BMO. So I was so happy when this came out, because, you know, I have literally been saying about this for so long. And as many of you veterans like Trent on this channel know about. So we'll go over to Twitter. Okay. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at MarketManiaCA, for the benefit of those listening on the podcast who can't see what's on the screen, which I'm just about to describe to you. So basically, I've made that too big, I think. The supply myth brought to you by a real estate industry trying to make extreme price gains sound reasonable. You know, I've done so many videos on this, but we'll go through it again because I think it's really good. So this actually came from BMO, like Trent says. And could we please stop with the supply myth? How many times have we all been told in the past year that Canada's raging housing market is largely due to the fact that we have the lowest supply of housing in the G7. We'll consider the attached chart from the budget source from OECD, whose job it is to compare stats across major economies. Firstly, Canada's supply is not particularly out of line with the OECD average, and certainly not much different than any of the UK, US, or Australia. And we have made the point many times that given a younger population than Europe or Japan, we would naturally have a lower ratio. Kids don't own homes. Second, a technical point, Canada is in fact not lower than the US. So it isn't even the lowest in the G7. Yet somehow our average home prices are roughly 60% higher on average than in the US, with essentially the same level of supply per capita. Yes, we should all do what we can to encourage supply, but clearly there is more at work here. And obviously, yeah, there is. There's more at work here. The thing that's at work is rampant speculation. If you've got 20, 30% of the supply going to people who are speculating in the real estate market, then that's a big problem. So I'm just trying to, because I also put something else. I did a calculation earlier. And I thought that was interesting. Oh, this is another good thing. So you can apply this as well to Canada as well. And it just shows you how this 5% CPI number is just a total joke. Fuel oil up 70%, gas up 48%, used cars up 35%, hotels up 29%, airfares up 24%, utility gas up 22%, bacon up 18%, oranges up 18%, furniture up 16%, beef up 16%, new cars 13%, chicken 13%, milk 13%, appliances 12%, fish 11%, eggs 11%, coffee 11%, food at home 4%, rent, owner's equivalent rents 4.5%. And that's a bogus number, as we know. So that is what they're saying. Inflation is at 5%, but it's really all these numbers that I just gave you there. None of them are which is below 5%, apart from the bogus owner's equivalent rents number. But yeah, so I'm trying to find a tweet I put out. Here we go. This is what I wanted to put out. So a scenario for you. The average Joe goes and buys a house for $1 million and gets a variable rate of 1%, which you would argue that a lot of people have gone and done. He puts 20% down, amortizes it over 30 years. And then we have another person, she's called the average Jane, who buys a house with the same payment. She can only afford the same payment. And now rates are at 3% because the bank's hiked by 50 basis points and we are where we are today. She can now only afford a house worth $750,000. That's $250,000 less, or 25% less. That means that when you actually take that into account, the fundamental value, I'm not talking about the nominal, the actual value. I'm talking about the fundamental, I can't even get my words out. The fundamental value, the underlying value has declined by 25% because people, their purchasing power has declined by 25%. And the fact is that, you know, wages are deeply negative. So there's no way that that number can be made up. So the real estate market has to now play catch up to get to a point where the prices are 25% lower. The likelihood is they'll go way beyond that, of course. But that just shows you how much purchasing power has been erased by a couple of rate hikes by the Bank of Canada. And the risk of default has risen significantly, as I've said. So just because the overnight rate has gone to 1%, and it's gone up 75 basis points because inflation is so high, because when rates rise and the amount of debt outstanding is so high, the risk premium goes up as well. And because the yields are up so much, risk premium also goes up because of what's happening in the bond market. We're starting to see a bond market that's very liquid. And something I also want to mention is even though they did that hike today, it won't reflect until tomorrow. So it actually kicks in tonight. So they announced it today. It kicks in tomorrow. So you'll see what happens in the bond markets and everything like that tomorrow. That's why if you follow any of the ETFs for corporate debt in Canada that I've mentioned in previous live streams that you should have on a watch list, you'll notice they did jack today. They didn't do anything. Some of them even closed zero on the day. They moved like nothing pretty much throughout the day. And that's because everybody is waiting for this to kick in and see exactly what happens. I mean, who knows? A bank might get a margin call. I don't think that will happen at this point. I just want to make that clear. But, you know, there's a risk, and that's why they're waiting until that kicks in, and it kicks in tonight. And that was only a rule that was, funnily enough, put in last year. I only found that out today. That was some rule that they put in last year. I think before that, when they increased the rate, it would just immediately take effect. But now it's the next day. So it's quite interesting. So we got a lot of people on the stream and a lot of people in the chat right now. So I'm just seeing if we got anything. They need to tackle the real estate cabal. People shouldn't forget that they had a huge role in this mess. Yeah, you're right. They did. And, you know, all the people who work in real estate and mortgage brokers did too. They're a moral hazard. And the reality is that over the next couple of decades, that industry is going to change drastically. You know, it is going to change from moral hazard to a completely different industry. I know a lot of realtors don't want to hear that, but the fact is it is going to happen. It's just going to be a massive overhaul. You're not going to have the commissions that you've seen over the past 20 years. Like, they're going to dwindle down to nothing. It's all going to go online. For luxury homes, there's always going to be realtors. There'll always be commissions. But I think it's going to change massively. You know, when you incentivize people to sell houses and sell mortgages, and they have no risk attached to the decision that the person makes who's buying that, it really is a moral hazard by definition. And I think, you know, realtors, there are good realtors out there, but a lot of them just aren't. Like, there's so many crooked realtors and mortgage brokers. Yeah, there are some good ones, no doubt. There is in everything, but it's just the fact that a lot of them aren't. That a lot of them just see dollar signs. And if the big commission checks weren't there, how many of those realtors would really be there? That's the question that you've got to ask. So, and it's pretty easy to say. So it'll be interesting. So it will be Bajinder's in the house. Still a plenty of rate holds from prior to the March 2nd initial hike of 25 basis points increase. We have about 1.5 months left until those expire and we hit the fan. Yeah, you make a great point, Bajinder, because obviously with all these rate hikes that happen, there's a chance that you're going to see people who have rate holds go, oh my God, I've got this insanely low rate, so I just bet a FOMO into the market. They don't understand sentiment. They don't understand any of these things. They've just got FOMO. And, you know, they're now seeing it like they've got a good deal because rates have gone up, that they've got some sort of saving. They don't realize what rates going up actually will mean. You know, and as we've seen with 2008, the people who get steamrolled are the people who bought within the past 2-3 years of the collapse of the market happening. So it's all the people who bought in 2021, in 2020, in 2019, in 2022, in this year. They'll all be the ones that go. And we're already starting to see a number of foreclosures hit the market here in Alberta. You know, I mean, that they were starting to come on before prices had even turned. And I even said it in previous live streams that it was baffling me, because I was like, how's that even possible? Because surely they could have just sold for a higher price, but maybe they were in more debt or something like that. But it really is just hilarious. But yeah, that's, I mean, I guess it's where we are, and we got to say, but I think I put something else. Yeah. So here it is. That is Canada right now with that average Joe and Jane story. Variable rates hit rock bottom around 1% and are going up to 3%. So fundamentally, real estate is worth 25%. Prices will adjust further than that and take longer. But every listing is now worth 25% less fundamentally, with 2 hikes in the back. And that's really my point, because that's the truth. Like, you got to look at this from a fundamental side of things if you want to make out in a good way. And you really, like that I mean, even if I was looking to buy, which I'm not, as I've said many times, I'm never going to buy a house in Canada, and that's to do with tax purposes. But even if I was looking to buy, I would be looking at this right now and I would be thinking, yeah, you know, the prices now need to adjust, and I'm just going to sit and wait for the prices to adjust and see what happens. And I'm going to grab my popcorn, and I don't really care. You know, they might go up slightly, they might flatline for a bit, but eventually they're going to play catch up with that. And at the moment, there's no hope in sight that rates are going down. So there's no worry that you have to sort of think the probability of prices going like 10, 15% higher now from here are just very, very low. Like they're very, very low, almost non-existent, maybe like a 10% chance of that happening. So you just have to take your chances. Do you want to be in the 90%? Do you want to be in the 10%? The reality is, when it comes to probabilities, people think about them the wrong way round. We've had a lot of people comment on videos recently saying in the summer, real estate is just going to be going to the moon again in Canada. Like, those people just really, they're not looking at interest rate hikes. I've said this, and I've been saying this for over a year now, and you guys know this, the guys that have followed this channel for a long time. You can go back in my videos and even check. I've said the catalyst for the housing market turning will be interest rates. And I've said that time and time again. And that's not because I'm some rocket scientist. That's not because I'm a genius, because I ain't. I'm really not. It's just because I look at the past and what's happened in different markets in the past. And that is always the catalyst that changes things. It's the catalyst that changed things in 2008 in the US. It was not a subprime lending disaster. And I've done podcasts on that. You can go to Spotify and check out the podcast that I did about 2008. We weren't doing live streams at that point, but I did, where I went back and I was actually reading a bit that came out in 2017 that was describing how it was actually rampant speculation by people with good credit, people who had good credit. It wasn't the subprime people that you were told in the media. So really, go check out that Spotify. I'm gonna actually find it on my phone right now, because that Spotify podcast is just very good to listen to. And at the time, a lot of people were listening to that. And it was released February 3rd. You can go to Spotify, just type in Market Mania Canada, and it's the truth behind the global financial crisis in 2008. We can learn so much from this. I published that February 3rd. So go listen to that podcast, because And there's a link to the podcast actually in the description. What am I even talking about? Whilst I'm talking about that, I just want to say some housekeeping things that I've changed with the channel. So basically now all the videos that are live streams will have the blue surround, and then all normal videos for the channel will have the red surround, just to make it easier for people to differentiate visibly. So price is down 50%. Wow, 53%. China housing market down 53% today. We're going to be okay, right? Yeah, because that's just rampant speculate. Like, a lot of people believe this market can be saved by speculation, and I just laugh at those people. I'm like, are you serious? Do you realize what that is? Like, you can't have speculation without this. And but what are we talking about? 53% sales down, 53% prices down. I don't even know. I'd love to know. So it's really interesting. It's great that you were saying this earlier, one of the earliest in Canada from what I can remember. Yeah, yeah, I don't claim to toot my own horn or anything like that. So like I said, I ain't no magician or anything like that. You just really have to look at what's happened in the past. And that's why I'm talking about what's happened with monetary policy in the past and looking at that with probabilities. Because when we think, a lot of people are going to think when the recession comes, they're going to fire up the printing press, start printing credit, and everything's going to moonshot. And those people, again, are not looking at what has happened in the past when inflation is high and the economy is slowed down into a recession. That hasn't necessarily been the case a lot of those times. In fact, it never has been the case that they've done quantitative easing. Quantitative easing is a relatively new thing over the past 20 years. So if inflation is high, they're just not going to do that. The probability is that they aren't going to do that. But, if inflation actually starts dropping substantially, there's a chance that they could do it. But then it's highly likely that inflation is going to go up. And I think there's going to be so many issues arising with the currency that the Bank of Canada may even have to go the other way. Because, when Home Capital Group basically had to be bailed out in 2017, the Canadian dollar absolutely tanked that day and hit a new low. And that was just something like 3 or 4% of the mortgage market. Imagine if Scotiabank, BMO, RBC, TD Bank all need bailouts, and there's a big banking crisis which is coming. The BIS forecasts are out there. All these reports that we've covered previously on the channel are there. So you imagine that that's there and that can happen. Just think about it, because the currency would be decimated. It would go to maybe 50 cents on the dollar. That would send inflation skyrocketing in Canada. And then they'd be forced to raise interest rates, because as we've seen, like Russia had to do, when the currency is going out of control into a spiral, rates have to go up. And it ain't pretty. It really isn't pretty when you've got a lot of debt in the economy. And that's these Western countries pretty much. So Trent says, Stefan Van Meter says 53%. Not sure if it was sales or not, but they are spiraling in a nosedive. Yeah, I'm not surprised with all the debacle that's going on from China. And that could be what's affecting the bond market actually over here as well. Might be interesting for you and the Canadian prepper to do a podcast or episode together. Yeah, Philip, after this live stream ends, please leave a comment with that so I don't forget. That'll just remind me. And then, yeah, I'll definitely look at doing that. I think I've gone across his channel before. Trader 586. It's not just rates, Luke. When people start losing their job, it's like gas on the fire. Yeah, you're exactly right. Unemployment. I mean, unemployment always goes down significantly. I mean, goes up significantly after it hits a low like we've got right now. I mean, that literally happened in not in 2008. It didn't all happen within 2008, but it was literally hitting a low before that, and I think around 2006, and then you're hitting highs in 2010. Like when it started going up, it didn't stop going up. So it's just, indicators like unemployment being at the lowest level on record are indicators that the trend is about to reverse, essentially. So we need Steve Saretsky. Oh, good Lord. Yeah, that guy. But yeah, anyway, it's incredibly interesting. One last thing that I wanted to go with you, just real time, so we can really see this and go through this together on Calculator Soup. The reason I'm using this is just because it's an easy calculator to use. So let's just pick a number here and just show how much purchasing power people have really lost. So let's use $1 million because everybody likes. I'm doing 100 million. Let's use $1 million and let's do the mortgage term of 30 years. And let's say that they were on a fixed rate of 1.5%. They were one of those lucky people who got the lowest rate locked in. So their monthly payment on that $1 million home, and I'm going to write this down, is $3,451. So 3,451. Okay. And that's at 1.5%. And then we're going to basically go now and we're going to change this to 4%, which is what it's at right now. So their payment is at 4,774. So the payment now has gone up substantially, obviously. But let's try and get that number back to the payment we had before. So at 1.5%, we're going to reduce the price now until we get to the number of three. What was I? I've completely lost track of what I was doing. So if we go, so I need to change this to 4%. What am I doing? So 3,451. I've got that number written down. So 800,000, we're still too high. We need to go down more. 700,000. Let's see if that is near. So it's around 710, maybe. Pretty much going to be at that. Yeah. So 720,000. 720,000. Yeah. So you're pretty much $715,000. So $715,000. So $285,000 in purchasing power has been lost since last year. Just think about that. Just think about that. It hasn't even been revealed yet. The party is only just getting started. Believe me, these numbers are huge. They cannot be. There's nothing that can paper over these numbers. And there's no institutions coming to buy all the homes to save everybody. That's not going to happen. You're going to see more people defaulting on their mortgage payments as variable rates rise. You're going to see home prices declining. You're going to see people going into negative equity. People aren't going to be able to afford their variable rate mortgage payments anymore who bought last year. And they aren't going to be able to sell their house either because they're going to be in negative equity, especially in places like Alberta, Saskatchewan, where prices didn't even rise that much because it's going to take such a little change in prices declining that it's going to mean that people are in negative equity very, very fast. And that's why it makes me laugh. It gives me great joy when I hear that people are coming from Ontario to buy bags here in Alberta because you know what? Good luck to them. That's all I can say. They're going to find out. I mean, everybody deserves to get a hard lesson, I think, at some point in their life. And they're certainly going to get one, let's face it. So, yeah, so it's, yeah, got the guppy, like, yeah, that's my good buddy there. You can check out his channel. He's really good. After selling his investments, I'm sure Stevie has changed his tune on Twitter lately. Yeah, I noticed. Well, I haven't noticed that because I blocked him on Twitter. I blocked him on Twitter because his tweets were just, they were just killing me at one point. I was just like, why does this sucker keep coming up on my Twitter feed? I'm not following him. I put that I'm not interested in his tweets. Like, so I blocked him. It's funny. But anyway, as a percentage term, so we said $715,000. So now we're going to really see what that percentage is. It's 28.5%, isn't it? I don't even need to do the math on this. It's 28.5% decline. So yeah, it's over. It's over, ladies and gentlemen, until there's some sort of sign that rates are going down for some reason or inflation is going to go down significantly. I'm not going to change my stance on this. You know, it's over. The party is definitely over. Whether people realize it or not is a different case. And obviously, there'll be a little back and forth for the next 4 to 6 weeks, as that person pointed out before. People have got rates locked in. They're going to think they're getting a deal. They're going to think, oh my God, I'm so smart that I locked in that rate. Like, my mortgage broker and my realtor told me to lock in that rate, and I did it. And I'm so glad because now I can buy at a 4% discount. Boom, they buy down 4% next month, 4% next month, 5%, 6%, 7%, negative equity. Can't afford the payment anymore because we've got 3 more hikes in the bag. 150 basis points. We're up at 2% now. So they can't even afford their mortgage payments anymore. They look to sell the house. They can't sell the house. Their only option is foreclosure. And that's what it is. That's the end. That's the end zone. Once the bubble is popped, that's it. It's done. And I wish I had some fireworks. I wish I had some champagne to pop tonight on the marvelous news of this 50 basis point hike that we've had. But bada bing, bada boom. Trent knows it. So you forgot about the recession. We need to dodge 3 or 4 bullets. Yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah, I did forget about that. Yeah, there's so many different things. There's no way. Unavoidable. Like, unless a miracle happens and Santa Claus is real, this ain't ending. Anyway, guys, smash that like button. I'll see you guys in the next live stream. Peace and love as always. Thanks for being on here, guys.